When you emotionally detach, something subtle but powerful begins to shift beneath the surface, and this is the part most people misunderstand. Detachment is not pretending you don't care, not playing games, and not trying to make her jealous. It's the internal decision to stop giving your emotional power away. As long as a woman feels she still has access to your emotions, reactions, validation, and attention on demand, her attraction cannot fully return. Attraction grows in space, not in pressure. The moment you stop trying to change her mind, stop checking her social media, stop rehearsing imaginary conversations in your head, and stop hoping for a specific outcome, you begin to reclaim your masculine center. This inner shift is felt even when no words are exchanged. Women are extremely intuitive when it comes to emotional energy, and they sense when a man has released attachment versus when he is silently waiting. When you are attached, your behavior leaks neediness even if you think you're hiding it. It shows in how quickly you reply, how much meaning you attach to small signals, and how emotionally invested you are in every interaction. Attachment puts her on a pedestal, and the moment a woman feels like she is your emotional source, polarity collapses. Detachment reverses this dynamic. When you genuinely let go of the outcome, you stop reacting emotionally to her choices. You're no longer trying to prove your value or convince her of anything. Instead, your value becomes self-evident because it no longer needs her approval to exist. This is where attraction quietly begins to rebuild. Emotional detachment forces her subconscious mind to work. When you were chasing, explaining, or trying to hold on, she had clarity. She knew where you stood. Certainty kills attraction, but when you detach, certainty disappears. She no longer knows how you feel, where she stands, or whether she still has the same effect on you. This uncertainty creates curiosity, and curiosity is the gateway to desire. The human mind hates unfinished emotional loops. When you remove yourself emotionally, you leave an open loop that her mind naturally wants to close. That's when she starts thinking about you again, often at the most unexpected times. Another crucial element of detachment is self-respect. When you stop pursuing someone who has chosen distance, you are communicating boundaries without saying a word. You are saying, I value myself too much to chase someone who isn't choosing me. This is deeply attractive because it reflects inner strength. Corey Wayne emphasizes that women don't fall in love with words. They fall in love with how a man makes them feel. Emotional detachment makes her feel that you are grounded, stable, and secure within yourself. That sense of emotional security is what many women crave, especially after the chaos of emotional overattachment. Detachment also removes pressure from the connection. Pressure suffocates attraction because it creates obligation. When a woman feels like she is responsible for your happiness, she instinctively pulls away. Detachment removes that burden. She no longer feels like she has to manage your emotions or protect you from disappointment. Ironically, when she feels free, she is far more likely to come back on her own terms. Freedom is not the enemy of commitment. It is the foundation of genuine desire. As you detach, you also stop reinforcing the version of yourself that pushed her away in the first place. Many breakups happen not because love disappears overnight, but because emotional imbalance slowly erodes attraction. Over-pursuing, over-explaining, and over-investing all communicate insecurity. When you step back, those behaviors disappear. What remains is the calm, confident version of you that she was originally attracted to. This allows her memory of you to shift. Instead of remembering the emotional tension and pressure, she starts remembering the moments when she felt excitement, connection, and attraction. Detachment also changes your internal dialogue. Instead of asking, "How do I get her back?" you begin asking, "Is this relationship even aligned with who I am becoming?" This mental shift is powerful because it puts you back in the position of chooser rather than pleaser. Women are drawn to men who choose, not men who beg to be chosen. When you emotionally detach, you are no longer trying to win her approval. You are evaluating whether she deserves access to your life. This flips the entire power dynamic. Another overlooked aspect of detachment is emotional neutrality. When you are detached, you don't react strongly to her actions. If she posts something online, you don't spiral. If she reaches out, you don't rush. If she doesn't, you remain steady. This emotional consistency creates contrast. Most men react emotionally, which makes their behavior predictable. Predictability kills mystery. Detachment reintroduces mystery because your reactions are no longer driven by fear of loss. She can't easily read you anymore, and that unpredictability reignites interest. Detachment also allows time to work in your favor. Time softens emotional edges. When you are no longer present to remind her of conflicts, disagreements, or emotional lows, those memories lose intensity. Meanwhile, positive memories remain. The brain naturally filters out pain over time, especially when there is no new negative input. Your absence becomes a canvas on which her mind paints selective memories. This process cannot happen if you are constantly reaching out, reopening wounds, or forcing conversation. Importantly, true detachment cannot be faked. Women sense when a man is pretending to be indifferent while secretly hoping for a reaction. That's still attachment. Real detachment comes from shifting your focus inward. You invest in your purpose, your physical health, your friendships, and your personal growth. Your life begins to feel full again without her presence. When that happens, your energy changes naturally. You're no longer waiting, you're living, and that energy is unmistakable. As you emotionally detach, you also become more attractive to others. This is not about making her jealous, but about expanding your sense of abundance. When you know you are desired, wanted, and capable of connection beyond one person, you stop clinging. Abundance kills desperation. Desperation repels attraction. When she senses that you are no longer emotionally dependent on her, it challenges her previous assumptions. She may have believed she was your only option. Detachment proves otherwise. Eventually, emotional detachment forces her to confront her own feelings without your influence. She can no longer rely on your reassurance or attention to regulate her emotions. She has to sit with the absence. And in that space, feelings that were buried under certainty begin to resurface. Missing you becomes possible because you're no longer present emotionally. Longing cannot exist where presence is guaranteed. The paradox is this: the moment you stop trying to get her back is often the moment she begins to feel drawn back to you. Not because of manipulation, but because attraction thrives on polarity, self-respect, and emotional independence. Detachment restores all three. You are no longer chasing love. You are embodying the qualities that make love naturally gravitate toward you. And whether she comes back or not, emotional detachment ensures one thing above all else: you win. You reclaim your dignity, your confidence, and your emotional stability. If she returns, it's because she chooses you again, not because you pressured her. And if she doesn't, you are already moving forward from a place of strength rather than loss. That is the real power behind emotional detachment. It doesn't just reverse attraction. It transforms you into the kind of man who never loses himself in the process. When you remove yourself and allow silence to take over, you are doing far more than simply not speaking. You are giving her mind the space it needs to reinterpret the entire relationship. Most men panic when communication stops because silence feels like loss, but in reality, silence is where attraction either dies permanently or quietly rebuilds. What determines the outcome is whether the silence is clean and confident or heavy with expectation and emotional tension. When silence comes from emotional strength rather than fear, it becomes one of the most powerful psychological forces in human connection. In the early stages after separation, her emotions are often clouded by relief from pressure, arguments, emotional responsibility, or the feeling that she had to manage your reactions. During this phase, anything you say will usually work against you. Words trigger defensiveness. Explanations feel like pressure. Apologies reopen wounds. Silence, on the other hand, allows her nervous system to relax. Without constant emotional input from you, the intensity of negative emotions begins to fade. This is a natural psychological process. Emotional spikes cannot sustain themselves without reinforcement. As time passes, silence begins to work in a different way. With no new negative interactions to anchor her current emotional state, her memory starts to reorganize itself. The human mind is wired to preserve emotional meaning, not emotional accuracy. Over time, the mind prioritizes emotionally significant moments and dulls the pain associated with conflict. This is why people often miss relationships that were objectively flawed. Silence accelerates this process because it removes reminders of why things ended. You are no longer present to say the wrong thing or trigger old emotional patterns. In this space, she begins to relive the relationship internally. And here is the critical detail: she is reliving it without your mistakes. When you are not there, she cannot associate you with frustration, disappointment, or emotional tension in real time. Instead, she replays moments of laughter, connection, intimacy, and emotional safety. These memories carry emotional weight because they are linked to how she felt in your presence when attraction was high. Silence allows these emotional memories to surface naturally without resistance. Another important dynamic of silence is that it removes the illusion of control. When you are constantly available, she unconsciously feels in control of the emotional dynamic. She knows she can reach you, get reassurance, or provoke a reaction. Silence removes that certainty. The moment she realizes she no longer has immediate access to your emotional world, a subtle shift occurs. Control is replaced with uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers reflection. She begins to ask herself questions she didn't need to ask before. What is he doing? Has he moved on? Does he still care? These questions reopen emotional pathways that were previously closed. Silence also disrupts the narrative she may have created to justify leaving. In many cases, people end relationships by convincing themselves that they are making the right decision. This narrative is reinforced by your emotional reactions. If you chase, plead, or argue, it validates her belief that leaving was necessary. Silence challenges that narrative. When you don't react the way she expects, it creates cognitive dissonance. Her story about you no longer fits your behavior. This forces her to reconsider her assumptions, even if she doesn't consciously realize it. There is also a powerful element of dignity in silence. When you don't chase or demand closure, you demonstrate emotional maturity. You show that you respect her choice, even if you don't agree with it. This does not mean you approve of the breakup. It means you are not fighting reality. This quiet acceptance is deeply attractive because it reflects self-respect. Many women later admit that the moment they began to reconsider was when they saw that the man did not fall apart or try to control the outcome. Silence gives her the freedom to miss you on her own terms. Missing someone cannot be forced. It arises naturally when absence is felt and emotional connection still exists. If you continue reaching out, you prevent the feeling of loss from settling in. Silence allows absence to become real. She begins to notice your absence in small, everyday moments when something reminds her of you, when she wants to share news, when she reaches for her phone and stops herself. These micro moments accumulate emotionally, often without her realizing why her feelings are changing. Another critical aspect of silence is that it removes your weak moments from her emotional memory. Everyone has moments of insecurity, frustration, or emotional overwhelm, especially near the end of a relationship. These moments often dominate her last impression of you. Silence freezes that image in time and allows it to fade. Without new emotional missteps to reinforce it, her perception of you gradually shifts back toward the stronger version of yourself, the man she initially felt drawn to. Silence also allows her to experience contrast. If she dates or talks to other people, the emotional difference becomes apparent. New connections lack the depth, familiarity, and emotional resonance you shared. This contrast becomes more noticeable when you are no longer present as an option. When you were available, comparison was unnecessary. In your absence, comparison becomes inevitable. And often, this is when appreciation grows. It's important to understand that silence is not passive. Internally, you are doing the work of emotional regulation, self-improvement, and personal growth. Externally, you are simply not interfering with the natural emotional process. This combination is what makes silence effective. If you are silent but stagnant, the energy does not shift. If you are silent and evolving, the energy changes dramatically. Even if she doesn't see it directly, she senses it when contact eventually happens. Silence also restores polarity. In many relationships, polarity erodes over time due to overfamiliarity and emotional dependency. Silence resets the emotional distance. Distance reintroduces tension, and tension is the foundation of attraction. This doesn't mean emotional coldness. It means emotional self-containment. You are no longer merging your emotional state with hers. That separation is what allows desire to exist again. Eventually, silence reaches a tipping point. The absence becomes loud. She begins to wonder why you haven't tried harder, why you seem okay, why you haven't fought for her the way others might have. This is often misunderstood as indifference, but it's actually the byproduct of self-respect. And paradoxically, this is what makes her start to feel the loss more deeply. When someone disappears without drama, the mind fills the gap with significance. When she finally reaches out, and often she does, silence has already done most of the work. Her message may seem casual, even meaningless on the surface, but it is rarely random. It is usually the result of accumulated emotional processing that she needed space to complete. At that point, the dynamic is different. She is no longer reacting to pressure. She is acting on curiosity and unresolved emotion. Silence also prepares you for any outcome. By the time she reaches out, you are no longer emotionally desperate. You are calm, grounded, and detached from the need for a specific result. This allows you to respond from strength rather than fear. And if she never reaches out, silence has still served its purpose. It has protected your dignity, allowed you to heal, and prevented further emotional damage. The deeper truth is that silence is not about getting her back. It's about removing yourself from a losing position. It is about stepping out of emotional chaos and allowing clarity to emerge for both of you. When you stop speaking, you stop influencing. And when you stop influencing, you allow genuine feelings to surface. That is why silence is so powerful. It doesn't force a decision, it reveals one. When a man redirects his energy away from emotional obsession and toward his purpose, something profound happens that goes far beyond attraction. Purpose is not just about career or money. It is about direction, meaning, and momentum in life. When a woman sees or senses that a man is moving forward with clarity and confidence, it triggers a deep biological and psychological response. Attraction is rooted in polarity, and polarity is created when a man is grounded in his masculine core. Purpose is the anchor of that core. Without it, a man becomes emotionally reactive, relationship-focused, and dependent. With it, he becomes centered, calm, and magnetic. During or after a breakup, many men make the mistake of placing all their focus on the woman. Their thoughts revolve around what she's doing, who she's with, and how to get her back. This collapses attraction because it communicates that the relationship is the center of their identity. When a man's world shrinks down to one person, he unconsciously communicates neediness, even in silence. Purpose expands a man's world again. It gives him something larger than the relationship to invest in. And when a man has something meaningful to pursue, his emotional state stabilizes. Stability is incredibly attractive because it signals strength. A man who is aligned with his purpose does not seek validation from a woman. He shares his life with her. That distinction is everything. Validation-seeking energy feels heavy. It feels like expectation, pressure, and emotional obligation. Purpose-driven energy feels light. It feels like invitation rather than demand. When a woman senses that she is not responsible for a man's happiness, she relaxes. And when she relaxes, attraction has room to grow. Corey Wayne often emphasizes that women want to be with men who have lives they can step into, not men who are waiting to be completed. Purpose also restores emotional independence. Emotional independence does not mean emotional coldness. It means emotional self-sufficiency. When your sense of fulfillment comes from progress, growth, and contribution, you no longer need constant reassurance from anyone. This shifts your behavior in subtle but powerful ways. You become less reactive, less anxious, and less attached to outcomes. You stop overanalyzing texts and interactions. You stop interpreting every signal as a sign of hope or rejection. This emotional steadiness is felt immediately by others, especially women who are highly attuned to emotional undercurrents. Another key element of purpose is momentum. Momentum creates confidence, and confidence is one of the most universally attractive traits. When a man is making progress physically, mentally, financially, or creatively, he carries himself differently. His body language changes, his tone of voice becomes grounded, his decisions become decisive. This is not something that can be faked. It is the natural byproduct of knowing you are moving in the right direction. When a woman sees this shift, it often triggers a reassessment. She begins to see you not as the man who lost her, but as the man who is becoming something more. Purpose also introduces scarcity. When your time, energy, and attention are invested in meaningful pursuits, they are no longer endlessly available. Scarcity increases value. This does not mean intentionally withholding attention. It means genuinely being occupied by a fulfilling life. When a woman realizes that you are no longer waiting around emotionally, it creates contrast. She sees that access to you is no longer guaranteed. This can trigger a fear of loss, especially if emotional connection still exists. Fear of loss often precedes renewed desire. There is also a deeper psychological effect at play. Women are naturally drawn to men who demonstrate leadership over their own lives. Leadership begins with self-direction. A man without purpose drifts. A man with purpose leads himself. This self-leadership creates a sense of safety. Even if the relationship ended due to emotional imbalance, seeing a man regain direction can reignite respect. And respect is the foundation upon which attraction is rebuilt. Without respect, love cannot survive. Purpose-driven focus also changes how you interact if and when she re-enters your life. Instead of centering conversations around the past or the relationship, you speak from the present. You talk about what you're building, what you're learning, and what excites you. This energy is contagious. It reminds her of the version of you she was initially attracted to, or perhaps introduces a stronger version she never fully experienced. Either way, it creates intrigue. Intrigue is far more powerful than persuasion. Another important aspect is that purpose protects you from emotional relapse. When you have a clear direction, you are less likely to fall back into old patterns of overinvestment or emotional dependence. You no longer need the relationship to give your life meaning. This prevents you from repeating the same mistakes if she does come back. Many reconciliations fail because the underlying dynamics never change. Purpose ensures that change is real and sustainable, not temporary or performative. Purpose also aligns you with abundance. When your life is full, you naturally encounter new opportunities, new people, and new experiences. This expands your options. Abundance shifts your mindset from scarcity to choice. Scarcity says, I need her to be happy. Abundance says, I want her, but I don't need her. That difference is felt immediately. Women respond to men who choose them, not men who cling to them. Choice is attractive because it implies value. As you deepen your focus on purpose, you also become less attached to how others perceive you. You stop trying to prove your worth. You know your worth because you are actively building it. This internal validation is incredibly grounding. It removes the emotional volatility that often pushes women away. You become calm under pressure, confident in uncertainty, and patient with outcomes. These traits are not learned through dating strategies. They are developed through purposeful living. Purpose also reframes rejection. Instead of seeing a breakup as a failure, you begin to see it as feedback. Feedback about where you lost balance, where you became too focused on the relationship, or where you abandoned your own direction. This reframing is empowering. It turns pain into growth, and growth is attractive not because it is visible, but because it changes how you show up in the world. Importantly, purpose is not something you adopt to get her back. If your purpose is secretly motivated by the hope of winning someone over, it will eventually collapse. True purpose stands on its own. It fulfills you regardless of who is watching. Ironically, when your growth is no longer about her, that is when it becomes most attractive to her. Authenticity cannot be negotiated. It must be lived. Over time, a purpose-driven man becomes irreplaceable not because he is perfect, but because he is grounded. Grounded men do not beg, chase, or try to control outcomes. They invite, they lead, and they allow others the freedom to choose. That freedom is essential for attraction. When a woman feels free to choose you again, she often does so with more certainty than before. And even if she never returns, purpose ensures that you continue moving forward. You do not remain emotionally stuck in the past. You evolve. You outgrow the version of yourself that needed validation. You become the kind of man who attracts not just one woman, but healthier, more aligned relationships in general. That is the ultimate win. Purpose is the quiet force that reshapes everything. It restores your confidence, rebuilds your self-respect, and reestablishes the masculine polarity that attraction depends on. When you are focused on becoming who you are meant to be, You stop trying to pull anyone back into your life. And that is often the exact moment they begin to feel drawn back toward you, not because you asked, but because you changed. When she finally reaches out after a period of distance or silence, that moment carries far more weight than most men realize. It is not casual, even if it appears that way on the surface. A text, a reaction to a story, a simple "hey," or a question about how you've been is often the result of a long internal process. By the time she reaches out, she has already felt the absence, questioned her decision, and wondered where she stands with you. This is why how you respond in that moment determines everything. Attraction that has slowly rebuilt through space, silence, and personal growth can either solidify or collapse based on your emotional posture. The most common mistake men make at this stage is emotional overexposure. They interpret her reaching out as confirmation that she wants to come back, and they rush to close the gap emotionally. They reply instantly, ask heavy questions, bring up the past, or express how much they missed her. This floods the interaction with intensity and recreates the very dynamic that caused attraction to fade in the first place. Attraction thrives on emotional pacing, not emotional dumping. When you move too fast emotionally, you signal insecurity and fear of loss, even if your words sound confident. A grounded response, on the other hand, communicates emotional strength. It says, without saying it, "I'm happy to hear from you, but my life is full and I'm not dependent on this interaction." This emotional neutrality is incredibly attractive because it restores polarity. You are not chasing and you are not cold. You are simply present. Corey Wayne often emphasizes that the goal is to be relaxed, playful, and outcome independent. Outcome independence is the key. When you don't need a specific result, you respond naturally rather than strategically. Timing plays a subtle role here as well. Responding immediately can feel overeager, while waiting too long can feel dismissive. The ideal response comes from your natural rhythm, not from calculation. When you are genuinely focused on your life, your responses naturally align with confidence. You reply when you're free, not when you're anxious. This communicates abundance. Abundance is felt, not stated. She senses that you are no longer waiting by the phone, and that alone shifts the dynamic in your favor. Another critical element is emotional tone. When she reaches out, she is often testing the emotional waters. She wants to know whether the old version of you is still there. If your tone is heavy, serious, or emotionally charged, it reassures her that nothing has changed. But if your tone is light, calm, and grounded, it introduces a new emotional experience. You are familiar, but different. This contrast creates intrigue. Intrigue pulls her closer than reassurance ever could. It is also important to resist the urge to seek clarity or define the interaction too early. Questions like, "Why are you texting me?" or "What do you want?" come from a need for certainty. Certainty kills attraction. At this stage, your role is not to interrogate or resolve the relationship, but to create a positive emotional interaction. Attraction is rebuilt through feelings, not discussions. When she feels good interacting with you, she becomes more open to deeper connection naturally. As the conversation unfolds, your focus should be on the present moment, not the past. Bringing up old issues, mistakes, or emotional wounds shifts the energy backward. The past already had its chance. This moment is about creating something new. When you stay present, playful, and curious without attachment, you allow her to experience you without the emotional baggage of the breakup. This is often what surprises her the most, that she can talk to you without feeling pressure, guilt, or emotional responsibility. If she suggests meeting up, This is where many men either overreact or underreact. Overreacting looks like excitement, relief, and eagerness to lock things down. Underreacting looks like indifference or emotional distance. The middle ground is confident openness. You express that you'd enjoy seeing her, and you set a simple plan without making it a big deal. This communicates leadership without attachment. Leadership is attractive because it provides direction without force. During an in-person meeting, your emotional state matters more than anything you say. If you are calm, centered, and enjoying your life, she will feel it. If you are secretly hoping the meeting will lead to reconciliation, that hope will leak through your behavior. This is why outcome independence is so crucial. When you don't need the meeting to go a certain way, you are free to be yourself. Authentic presence is magnetic. It allows her to feel safe and attracted at the same time. Another key factor is restraint. Even if the interaction goes well, it's important not to rush emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy builds through shared positive experiences over time. If you try to accelerate the process, you risk collapsing the polarity again. Let her move at her pace. When a woman feels free to choose, she invests more deeply. Pressure, even subtle pressure, creates resistance. It's also worth understanding that reaching out does not always mean she wants to get back together immediately. Sometimes it's curiosity, sometimes it's nostalgia, sometimes it's unresolved emotion. Your job is not to assign meaning, but to respond in a way that allows attraction to continue growing. When you don't label the interaction, you allow it to evolve naturally. This requires patience and emotional maturity. If she pulls back again after reaching out, this is another test. Many men panic at this stage, interpreting it as rejection. But fluctuation is normal when emotions are involved. The key is consistency. You remain grounded, respectful, and focused on your life. You don't chase and you don't punish her with silence or coldness. You simply continue living. Consistency builds trust. Trust supports attraction. There is also a deeper psychological layer to this moment. When you respond from strength rather than need, you are rewriting her emotional story of you. She may have left because she felt overwhelmed, pressured, or responsible for your emotional state. Your new behavior contradicts that story. This creates cognitive dissonance, which often leads to reevaluation. She begins to see you through a new lens, one that includes growth, self-respect, and emotional stability. Ultimately, the moment she reaches out is not about winning her back. It's about maintaining the internal shift you've already made. If you revert to old patterns, the opportunity closes. If you stay aligned with who you've become, the door remains open. And whether she walks through that door or not, you remain in control of yourself. That is real confidence. If reconciliation happens, it will happen because she feels safe, attracted, and free to choose you again. Not because you convinced her, argued your case, or proved your worth. Attraction is not negotiated, it is experienced. Your response to her reaching out sets the emotional frame for everything that follows. And if it doesn't lead to reconciliation, you still win. You have handled the situation with dignity, composure, and self-respect. You have proven to yourself that you are no longer controlled by fear of loss. That internal victory is permanent. It carries into every future relationship. You become a man who responds, not reacts. Who invites, not chases, who leads himself first. That is why the moment she reaches out is so powerful. Not because it guarantees her return, but because it reveals who you have become. And the man you are in that moment determines not just whether she comes back, but the quality of every connection you will have moving forward.